The following video contains a fictional narrative created solely for storytelling and entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or real events is purely coincidental. This work, including all audio, text, related content, is the sole property of the author and is fully protected under copyright law. No part of this material may be copied, reproduced, or used in any form without the author's express written permission. Genesis knew that her marriage was in shambles. It had been on the road of disaster for a long while now. She blamed Malcolm for the most part, but she knew that she had not acted like an angel herself. She had her secrets too. Secrets that she did not want Malcolm to discover before it was time. She had to play her cards right. She had to play them just right to make sure that her move had monumental impact. She was still angry from the meeting that she had with Detective Gibbs the morning before, but she had to compartmentalize her thoughts. She had to shift her focus on her next move. It would be the last thing that Malcolm did if he ever thought that he would get away with pulling out the rug from under her and have her to agree to help hand over their fortune to some hussy. He should know her better than that. As she sat sipping her coffee in the breakfast nook, she heard someone enter. "Good morning, Mom," Grant said, and came over to give her a kiss on the cheek. Genesis loved being a mom. With all of the mistakes that she had made in her life, and there were many, she knew that her sons were the best things that she had ever done. "Good morning, Goober," she said while tickling his side. He rolled his eyes because he had told her time and again that he did not want her to call him Goober anymore. Even though he was 11 years old, to her, he would always be her baby. "Let me fix you a plate," she told him. He sat down and poured himself a tall glass of orange juice and then peeled a banana and began to eat it. He and his older brother, Gene, had some of the healthiest appetites of any boys that Genesis had ever seen, so she made sure that he had more than enough on his plate. She came back with a plate of turkey sausages, eggs, fresh fruit, and wheat toast. She placed the plate in front of him. Malcolm entered the room and looked at the two of them. "Good morning," he said to Genesis. "Good morning," she replied. "Good morning, son," Malcolm said to Grant, who was chewing a mouthful of food. "Did you pray over your meal first?" A look of guilt flashed across Grant's eyes as his chewing slowly came to a halt. His silence gave all the answer that Malcolm needed. Malcolm began to lecture him about the importance of praying before his meal. Genesis hated when Malcolm would be hard on the boys about the smallest things. Malcolm felt that she spoiled the boys and let them get away with a lot, and she felt that he was too hard on them. This time she did not intervene because she was trying to play it cool about the information that Detective Gibbs had provided her on Malcolm and the mystery woman. The information still upset her because she knew the woman's grandmother, and boy, did she have a bone to pick with that grandmother. "I'm going to run an errand," Malcolm told Genesis. "I should be back before dinner." She smiled sweetly and gave him a slight wave. "Have fun," she said in a sugary, sweet tone. Malcolm paused and gave her a strange look as he was not used to her being this kind 2 days in a row. He was suspicious, but simply nodded at her and walked away. "Mom," Grant said after biting off a piece of his toast, "do you and Dad still love each other?" She should not have been surprised by the question. She knew that he and Gene had seen her and Malcolm fight a lot. She did not want to lie to her son, but she did not want to destroy his world with the truth. "Goober," Genesis said with a motherly tenderness, "you do know that I will always take care of you, right?" Grant looked up at her and chewed his breakfast slowly while in deep thought before he answered her. "I know," he replied with a smile, but she could read his eyes. His eyes were telling her that even though he knew that, she would do anything for him and his brother. He was still worried. She had to fix this mess that Malcolm had created. She was going to make sure that her children would not suffer from his mistakes. She got up from the table and went to kiss Grant on top of his head. "I'm going to take care of something," she said. "Now finish up so that Ezra can take you to school." She left the kitchen and went into her bedroom. She pulled out her cell phone and dialed her sister's number. Harmony picked up on the second ring. "Hey, baby sis," she said to Genesis. "Hey," Genesis said. "I need you to do me a favor." Harmony chuckled on the other end of the phone. She knew her sister was not always one for greetings and small talk, at least with her. Harmony was surprised that Genesis would ask her for help. Over the last year or so, she was the one asking Genesis for help. She knew that this request should be interesting. "Well, what can I do for you?" Harmony asked. She listened very carefully to what Genesis told her. At first, she was hesitant to agree to Genesis's terms, but she needed the money. She rationalized that this would be a good thing for her and her 2 kids. This could provide support for the things that they needed. Once she thought about her children, Carissa and Dylan, accepting this request was a no-brainer. "Sure, I will do it," Harmony said. "I will call you back with the details," Genesis said without saying thank you, and then she abruptly hung up the phone. She now was running through her mind what her next move would be. She picked up her phone and placed another call. "Hi," she said to the caller on the other end of the phone. "Can you meet me tomorrow morning for breakfast?" She paused as the other caller responded. "No," she replied. "I will pick the location. I will see you then." The next morning, Genesis had Ezra drive her to her meeting near downtown. He pulled up in front of Ambro's Grand Restaurant. This was one of the most, if not the most, luxurious breakfast and brunch locations in the city. She was a regular patron there, and the staff knew her well. They always made her feel like royalty. Ezra came around to the back passenger door of the Cadillac Escalade, opened it, and let her down slowly with his hand. "Thank you, Ezra," she smiled at him. "I have it from here." "Yes, ma'am," Ezra replied with a nod. She walked inside the restaurant and was immediately greeted by the staff. "Welcome, Mrs. Gordon." Amber, one of the service managers, greeted her. "Good morning, Amber," she replied with a big smile. "Let me take you to your usual table," Amber said, and Genesis followed her to her usual table. The booth was in a somewhat secluded area of the restaurant. It was next to a window where the sunlight shined beautifully outside. The beautiful day outside was a stark contrast to what she was about to do during this meeting. "Would you like something to drink while you wait on your guest?" Amber asked Genesis as she placed a menu in front of her. Genesis purposefully arrived earlier than she had asked her guest to arrive. She took the few moments that she had to make sure that she had everything that she needed for this meeting. "I would like a cranberry mimosa," she replied. "Coming right up," Amber said. She then came back and served her her cranberry mimosa. "This will be good for now," Genesis said. "I will now just wait for my company to arrive." 20 minutes later, her guest arrived at the booth. Her guest sat down across from her as Amber handed them a menu. "What would you like to drink?" Amber asked. "I will have a coffee with lots of cream and a cube of sugar," Vivian, Genesis's secretary, replied. After Amber had left to get Vivian's coffee, Vivian took her purse off of her arm and placed it next to her. She then smiled at Genesis. "Good morning, First Lady," she said cheerily to Genesis. "I must say I was surprised about your invite." Genesis slowly sipped her drink and stared at her secretary over the rim of her glass, which gave Amber time to come back with Vivian's coffee. "Thank you," Vivian said to Amber, who then told them both that she would return for their food orders. Vivian noticed that Genesis had not said too much of anything since she had arrived, so she quietly sipped her coffee after praying over it. Genesis reached into her large designer bag and pulled out some documents. "You did not specify what our meeting was about," Vivian said. "But I did bring what I needed to take notes." "Please take plenty of notes," Genesis finally spoke. She then carefully placed the documents in front of Vivian, who frowned in confusion at first, as she did not understand why Genesis had placed documents in front of her. Vivian began looking through the documents piece by piece, and it appeared as if the color had drained from her face. While Vivian continued to look through the documents, Amber returned to take their food orders. Genesis placed an order for loaded avocado toast, but Vivian decided not to order any food. She had clearly lost her appetite. Vivian's mouth had suddenly become very dry. She reached for her coffee and gulped it down quickly. It was still very hot, and she winced as the heat hit her throat. She began to cough over and over. Genesis did not flinch at all. She just calmly stared at Vivian while she coughed repeatedly. She did not lift a finger to help her. Amber rushed over to Vivian to help her, but Vivian indicated to her that she would be okay. "Are you sure you don't need any help?" Amber asked Vivian. Vivian nodded as she patted her mouth with her napkin. Amber left Genesis and Vivian alone. Vivian looked out of the window. She appeared to be embarrassed and at a loss for words. "Well," Genesis said, while she tapped her well-manicured nails on the table. She also began tapping her foot under the table. She had to restrain from kicking Vivian under the table. "Who is she?" Genesis demanded. Vivian looked as if she had had the worst heartburn of her life. "She is my granddaughter," Vivian responded while tightly clutching her napkin in her hand. "So that means that the little girl is her daughter," Genesis said, even though she already knew the answer. "Yes, Destiny is my great-granddaughter," Vivian confirmed. Sandra Dennis was the name of Vivian's granddaughter. This made little Destiny Dennis Vivian's great-granddaughter. "Is she your son's or daughter's daughter?" Genesis asked. "She is my daughter Renee's daughter," Vivian answered. Genesis had met Renee before. Quite a few times, as a matter of fact. Renee was a former member of the church's praise and worship group. She was a gifted singer, and Genesis never fully understood why Renee had abruptly moved. She had moved away to Florida almost 3 years earlier. Vivian kept pictures of her family on her desk at church. There were pictures of Renee and Renee's 3 daughters, Tamina, Sandra, and Noelle. When Detective Gibbs had shown her the pictures of Malcolm and the mystery woman and child, this was why Sandra's face had looked familiar to Genesis, because she had seen pictures of her on Vivian's desk. However, when she saw on the paperwork given to her that Vivian was the owner of the home that Sandra lived in and learned that Vivian was Sandra's grandmother, it had all come back to her memory. "How long has Malcolm been seeing your granddaughter?" Genesis demanded. Vivian explained that she did not know that Malcolm and Sandra have been having a relationship initially, but when she saw Jean's convertible parked at the house one day, she originally thought that Jean had stopped by. But she claimed to her dismay that she discovered that it was Malcolm. She said that she wanted to tell Genesis, but Sandra had begged her not to. At the time, Sandra had not too long learned that she was pregnant. "Is she Malcolm's baby?" Genesis demanded. "Yes." Vivian nodded and looked down at her own hands, which were tightly clenched together on top of the table. Just then, Amber returned with the avocado toast that Genesis had ordered earlier. "Can you just pack it up for me?" Genesis asked Amber. Amber nodded and quickly left the table. "So what happens now?" Vivian asked. "For one," Genesis began, "you are not to utter a single word of this to Malcolm." Vivian nodded eagerly. "And what about my job at the church?" Vivian asked. "What job at the church?" Genesis said sarcastically as she glared at her. Vivian swallowed and looked back down at her hands. "Don't worry," Genesis said. "I will pay you a nice severance, and it will include extra for your silence." Genesis then pulled out a non-disclosure agreement for Vivian to sign. She explained to Vivian that once she signed it, she could not speak about their conversation. Vivian signed the paperwork. Genesis instructed Vivian that she would need to draft a letter of resignation. She went over with Vivian what she needed to say and what Vivian's response would be to other people having questions about her resignation. Vivian agreed to the terms. "You will have your money by this Friday," Genesis said. Amber came back to their table. "Will this be on one check or separate checks?" she asked them. "Please separate our checks," Genesis replied. After Genesis had retrieved the documents that she had shown to Vivian, Amber returned with separate checks. Genesis paid for her order along with a tip. She could have easily paid for Vivian's coffee, but she was going to be petty and not do so. "I bet you are glad you only ordered coffee," Genesis said while retrieving her bag. "That's probably the only thing you can afford here." She stood up from the table, walked away, and did not look back at Vivian. This concludes part 4 of Secrets of a First Lady. Thank you for checking out Purple Rose Studio. We hope you were entertained and enjoyed this latest installment. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, and leave your feedback. Be sure to turn on your notifications so you won't miss any of our amazing videos.